Dungeons, Dragons, and Dinosaurs is back with a part 2. If you folks remember, a while back I talked about a D&D book called Dr. Drolin's Dictionary of Dinosaurs, but this time we've got a brand new one coming to town. This one has been dubbed Professor Primula's Portfolio of Paleontology. Just like before, this book is being written and created by world-famous paleontologists, including folks like Nathan Barling. On top of that, it'll feature beautiful illustrations from incredibly talented paleo artists like Gabriel Ugueto and Rudolf Hema. We don't know all the creatures that'll be in the book, but we've got a few hints, including my favorite dinosaur, Giganotosaurus, my favorite hadrosaurid, Lambeosaurus, and the amazing ever-present Smilodon, the most famous of the saber-toothed cats. Just because they're both some of my favorites, here's some quick fun facts about both Giganotosaurus and Lambeosaurus. Unlike T-Rex, who had a powerful crushing bite meant to resist the torsion and struggle of their prey, Giganotosaurus had jaws that could close incredibly fast, allowing it to deliver multiple bites to their victims. Giganotosaurus was the largest Carcharodontosaurid and one of the largest carnivorous dinosaurs ever, possibly second place, but that's always being debated. As of right now though, with Spinosaurus' most recent weight estimates, Giganotosaurus just barely nudges past. But at the end of the day, they're their own animal, and no less brilliant because of it. Lambeosaurus, on the other hand, some folks may dismiss as just another hadrosaur, but personally I think they are one of the most beautiful and unique of the dinosaurs. They have a fairly unique crest that only really shares some similarities with one other dinosaur, Corythosaurus, but otherwise it's a fairly unique hatchet shape. These guys were thought to be generalistic and less selective in their feeding, allowing them to eat much more of the plant material around them rather than focusing in on any one thing in particular. A generalist diet isn't usually a bad idea, and it can help with the longevity of an animal overall if they can adapt to multiple types of food. And you can talk all you want about how hadrosaurs are weak or fodder or whatever, but they're not. At the end of the day, they're still powerful animals that are upwards of 20 feet in length and have powerful legs. These guys had to deal with tyrannosaurs like Gorgosaurus and Daspletosaurus, so you know they're at least a little tough. Now, I want you to take those fun facts and think about how they might be used in a D&D setting, because remember, this book is being made by actual paleontologists, and they're aiming to make it as accurate as possible. I can't wait to see what they cook up. Alongside all these amazing creatures will be information about their ecology, their behavior, their relationships to other animals, and of course, their stats. They're launching this new Kickstarter campaign to once again bring you accurate dinosaurs to your D&D sessions, but unlike before, this time around they're also including other prehistoric creatures like Cenozoic mammals. We don't have too many stat blocks yet, but we can use this animal known as Yichi as a good example of how they're incorporating science into the fantasy setting. Yi is a part of a group of dinosaurs known as the Scansoriopterigidae, and Yi and several of its relatives had weird membranous wings that were different from other dinosaurs. Unlike birds, these wings wouldn't have allowed Yi to fly. Instead, it may have allowed it to glide, albeit not particularly gracefully. We see in Yi's clumsy glider ability that they can fall consistently but slowly and take no damage from the fall so long as they're not incapacitated. You can also use the magical rules to allow it to be a familiar for your character or for one of your player's characters, and allow it to get the abilities of a wyvern, giving it a little bit of poison and an edge to its abilities. While we don't have too many examples from this new book, we can use examples from the previous book to kind of give you some more examples and give an idea of the creativity. For example, Dinosaurus in the previous book had an ability called Wader that allowed it to move through up to 6 feet of water without being slowed or having to swim. This is because current science points towards Dinosaurus living in and around swampy areas where they would have used their massive claws to dig up plants from the riverbeds or lake beds. Actually, we can also see this in Dinosaurus' stat block as well, because if Dinosaurus hits someone with both of its attacks, they also take some damage from the mud they raked up. Of course, Dinosaurus can also be affected by the optional magical rules, and almost every creature in these books has one of those that allows them to give some more flavor to your campaigns. That being said, dinosaurs are wow enough in my opinion, and many of the abilities that these creatures have would already serve to make them a formidable challenge to many players and campaigns, or just make them interesting interactions for your players to find. That being said, of course, there's gotta be some variety. You can't just have all the creatures everyone expects to see, which is why they have boss monsters. One of my favorites of these from the first book is known as Zethul, the Prismatic Terror, a Spinosaurus that was mutated over time by magical crystals. These magical crystals' infusion into its body is an ongoing and painful process that leaves Zethul particularly ill-tempered. Zethul has all the abilities of a regular Spinosaurus, but it also has some enhanced and powerful abilities from its crystalline morphology. For example, there's a particularly powerful AoE attack called Unleash Energies that allows it to burst outwards with lightning damage, forcing everyone nearby to make a Constitution save. For DMs, of course, there are many ways to incorporate a powerful magical boss monster into your game, but this is how I did it for Zethul. In a mountainous region, my party found a large cave mouth with low, long hanging vines in front of it. For some reason, the area seemed devoid of most other animals, except for the birds that were flying around, so the druid used Speak with Plants to find out from the vines what was going on. The vines tell him of a large and mysterious, aggressive creature living within the cave, and that it consistently comes in and out, scaring off many of the other creatures. But my party, feeling pretty satisfied with themselves after saving a town from a bunch of werewolves, decide to test it anyways and go inside the cave. At first, there's not much, but as they continue to delve further and further into the cave, they discover large red crystals dotting the walls and sticking up from the floor and ceiling. They're curious, and they try to investigate the crystals, only to find that the crystals are incredibly tough, and while they can be broken, they don't break very easily, and that they possess some kind of inherent lightning abilities. What they didn't realize was the second they found those crystals, the boss already knew that they were in the cave, and the further they delved, they find corpses and bones of past kills of animals and humanoids alike. You see, one of the things that I didn't see too much of in the book were lair actions, so I incorporated some of my own. This one's not so much a lair action as it is a passive ability, but I changed it so that Zethul's crystals had grown over his eyes. Instead of seeing in the normal way, he could use the crystals that dotted the cavern he lived in to see instead. This basically allowed him a version of blindside or true sight, able to find and detect the party no matter where they were and no matter if they were invisible or not. This of course was some DM mischief from my side, because Zethul purposely let them come as far into the cave as they could go before it cut off their retreat. Not only could Zethul see basically everything within the cave, but on top of that it could use one of its lair actions to destroy some of the crystals within the cave to regain some of its own hit points. After it used this ability twice, that would initiate the second phase of this creature's boss fight, turning it into a slightly more powerful version of itself. My party fought hard, and they did eventually defeat the creature, though not without some considerable effort. While some of that is homebrewed, you can see just how well they set you up in the baseline to allow your creativity to just adapt from what they've already given you. You could have Zethul terrorize a mining operation that accidentally discovered its crystals, or you could have a nobleman accidentally bring it thinking it was a statue before it comes to life and terrorizes his court. There's a lot of possibilities. On top of that, they're adding more brand new monsters in the same vein as Zethul in this brand new book, and they're allowing you folks who back it to get the opportunity to vote and submit some custom ideas. Of course, there is a plethora of creatures you could come up with, and I can't wait to see if any of your guys' ideas get showcased in the brand new book. On top of that, they're adding a new system to create new demigod-style creatures inspired by King Kong, so they're kind of like kaiju. These creatures will have an ability known as Ultra Gigantism, allowing them to reach truly enormous sizes, and one of them has already been teased as a Reaper-style Therizinosaurus. I don't know about you guys, but with this new Ultra Gigantism, I've already got plans for a gigantic Pachyrhinosaurus. Aside from the boss monsters, this new book is planning on releasing with around 40 new creatures, but if we hit all the stretch goals, that could be boosted to around 80. Aside from creatures, there are also new subclasses and playable races in the unlockable content, and I hope we reach those, because that would mean we get 4 new subclasses and 5 new playable races. In the previous book for playable races, we got several dinosaur folk, including the Pluven, who were a sort of raptor folk, and the Ankyliers, I don't know for sure, but they're Ankylosaur folk. Some of the new ones include the Rinchi, which are a type of pterosaur folk, specifically Rhamphorhynchus, which also happens to be my favorite pterosaur, funnily enough. They're also adding Neanderthals as a playable race, giving them Ice Age adaptations to allow them to survive better in the cold and track prey over longer distances. I'd be very curious to see how 2 different people play Neanderthal and a human in the same party. And I'm not gonna lie, the abilities of the Rinchi would be incredibly fun to play, especially for a rogue-style character, because they're particularly good at snatching things, and they have an inherent flight speed. Honestly, if you're the DM and not playing as one of the characters, they would do really well as like a band of thieves to kind of throw off the party, give them a bit of a chase. Especially given the fact that they could fly, you could maybe have them steal something from the party and bring it back up to their nest or their cave or wherever they're living, and have the party have to track them back down and either negotiate or fight to get their objects back. In the official release, the Rinchi may have some aquatic traits as well, because Rhamphorhynchus, the animal that they're based on, was known to have some aquatic traits. For most of their life, the primary prey of Rhamphorhynchus were aquatic, mainly fish and small cephalopods. Because of this, we have a ton of Rhamphorhynchus fossils, because these guys stuck around water sources and often would die by them, which would allow them to be preserved much easier. It was thought that, like many modern birds, they would have been able to forage while swimming, not simply skimming the surface of the water. It's got relatively large feet, but the torso and legs themselves are relatively short, allowing it to launch itself from the water. Because of this, personally, I think they should have a swimming speed as well as a flight speed, even if it is a little overpowered. We know there's going to be at least 2 new subclasses, the Ancient Beast Warlock and the Path of the Tyrannosaur Barbarian, but we don't know too much about what they're going to actually do as of right now. But here's where I can give you examples from the previous book, because they had 3 playable subclasses which 3 of my players actually all happened to choose. One of my players is an Artificer who chose the Bone Sculptor subclass, which gives his abilities a more primal feeling. He can collect the bones, scales, and other body parts from slain foes and turn them into various useful tools and items. And now that he's a high enough level, he can also create a sort of amalgamation, a monster out of all these parts that can help protect him. The construct allows him a bit of buffer room because it basically gives him a sort of shield that he can hide behind if need be. A shield that can also, hit things. Another one of my players is a Druid who took the Circle of Cycles from the previous book, allowing him a very adaptive and creative way of play. One of my favorite abilities from the Circle of Cycles is it allows you an adaptive wild shape, allowing whatever you transform into to get the traits of certain other creatures that it might not normally have. For example, he could turn into a Velociraptor and then give that raptor wings and a flight speed of 15 feet. The adaptive wild shape is incredibly creative, and personally I think it's one of my favorite parts of the previous book. One of my players also took the Big Game Hunter from the Ranger subclass in the previous book, and honestly I didn't think it'd be that bad because Rangers are notorious for being around a mid-level character. But oh my god, for those of you who have complained about Rangers being underpowered, then this is the subclass for you. You get only really one big disadvantage, which is that you no longer gain proficiency with melee weapons, but what you get in return for that is well worth it. Instead of a favorite enemy type, they just get favorite enemy large creature, which means their favorite enemy is all large creatures. And that ability just gets more powerful because they also get that with huge and gargantuan creatures, and they don't have to swap them out, they get all 3. They've also got an ability called Special Shot, which basically gives them special types of attacks, including a trick shot, a drill shot, and what's called a power shot. With his special abilities and his uncanny use of ranged weapons, my Ranger has definitely become a much more massive threat at my table and is one that I have to keep more of a caution on. And again, all of that is just from the previous book. We have no idea what these new subclasses could entail, but if that's just the previous one, I can't imagine how much they've gotten better over time. Just like last time, they'll have more paleo-inspired environments based off of prehistoric ecosystems. One of these is based on the environment during the Carnian Pluvial episode, where it basically rained for around 2 million years and what that would do to the landscape. Just like before, these environments will be filled with a variety of plants that all have their own special unique abilities and adaptations that allow them to survive and that your players may find useful if they collect them. The amount of detail they give you really allows you to bring these things to life in your game and give your players an immersive experience beyond just pen and paper. On top of that, I don't know a single group of players that I've ever played with or DM'd for that don't like making their own sort of home base or hometown, something along those lines. Now, with the new Bastion system, your players can create museums to house all of their incredible artifacts that they've collected over their amazing adventures, alongside a new system to extract and display fossils. This could be a great way for your players to earn a passive income without going the normal routes, opening a bar or something along those lines. And if they're doing it in a well-protected city or a city that they own or live in, then they could also be nearby whenever they need to. Plus, for you creative DMs out there like me, I'm sure you could find a myriad of different ways to use this museum setting, maybe a Night at the Museum style adventure or something along those lines. I know some parties can get real crazy, so maybe they steal for their own museum for one reason or another, and that allows them to do XYZ. Plus, if you happen to have a necromancer in your group, finding and excavating dinosaurs could also be useful in other ways. This book will have an abundance of creatures, items, and locations for you to add to your D&D campaigns, but we can add even more if folks support it over at the new Kickstarter. The Kickstarter will, of course, be linked down below. This Kickstarter definitely has my support, but we could use your support as well, so definitely go check it out yourself. I can't wait for it to come out to add new and amazing dinosaurs and accurate prehistoric creatures to my campaigns. Let's all get ready for Professor Primula's portfolio of paleontology, Dungeons, Dragons, and Dinosaurs Part 2. I'll see you over at the Kickstarter.